So one Friday I was not there in church and I heard three new Telugu speakers came. So I thought I will promote myself to English because competition is happening there. So that's good. I mean, the church is growing, improving. But when we think of all of this, right, God has a plan and a perfect time for everything. And when we look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and there are 8 verses, but these are beautiful verses that we can all pay attention to and read. We'll all read together. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and the first 8 verses. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. If you look at all of these, it is brilliant, right? That God covers all seasons and all times of a tiny human life. And he says there's a time for everything. Now let's just imagine all of us are going on a small journey. And you know what a mile marker is, right? And there are mile markers or kilometer markers. And as you are going in this journey, every time you cross one mile marker, you know that you have been moving ahead. And you know that you have covered so much distance. But you can't make those mile markers come faster, right? Unless, of course, you're one of those super speeding guys like Praveen Umadi, then the mile markers are slower than the car. But otherwise, you can't make them come faster than what you can. The distance remains the same. In our life, many times, we'll have to wait for these milestones from God. Many times, our expectation is, right? We want those mile markers to move. But God doesn't move. Just imagine for a moment, God grants you that wish. And now you're on a journey. And as you're traveling, these mile markers also keep moving erratically however they want. Some come fast, some come slow, some move away. What do you lose? You lose your complete sense of direction and where you are in life. Many times when we think about many things in life, we think we wish this happened faster. We wish this happened slower. We think that this is the time this should have happened. We think this is the time that should have happened. And sometimes our prayers also like that. Lord, by next Sunday, make sure this is happening. Or within the next 1 year, I want my career, my wife, my kids to be settled like this. Or within the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, these are our grand plans. Whenever people spoke such things in the church, in the Bible, God always laughed at them and mocked them, saying, do you know that whether you'll be alive tomorrow or not? Those of you who are making plans saying that I will build this, I will build that, and I will do this, I will do that, you do not know if you'll be alive tomorrow. Or that rich young man who said, oh, I had such a plenty harvest. Let me break down all the barns. Now I'll build all these warehouses and I have wealth for a lifetime. And it says, eat, drink, be merry, my soul, so that you don't have to work ever. And God says, do you know that tonight your soul is demanded? Now, it might not be that dramatic in our lives, but something that we need to remember is God appoints time and seasons in our life. And many times it is very difficult to actually wait for God's time. It is very easy to sing, in His time God makes everything beautiful. Or we can say, Kitna Madhur Samay hai, and you can think, oh, it is so beautiful. But imagine, for a person who's going through some deep pain, some deep challenge, some deep hurt, waiting on this time can become very painful. But this morning, what we will do is, we will remember Romans 8:28 And we know that God causes all things to work together for the good of those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose, and believe that it is God's timing that actually preserves us. Imagine if things ran according to our time. What will happen? I think a third of us will say, let the sun rise at 9:30. A few of us will say, let not the moon rise, or let not the moon set. A few of us will say, let there be no night at all. Or some of us young ones say, let it be all night. Do you understand? This might sound very dramatic or very exaggerated, but that is how we look at time because we want to control that. But something which God has not given us control over is this unforgiving clock which will keep running every second at the pace that God has set. Before you realize, not like 2 3 days ago, I was very young, I was like 16, 17. Suddenly today morning, I got up, I feel, hey, I'm 45. How come? Time just flies. And suddenly, before you realize, Frankie is saying, I'm feeling old. Oh, he's not here, right? So we can joke about it. But this is how time flies for man. But when you look from God's perspective, do you know we are still a blink of an eye for God? Just like a blade of grass that comes in the morning and we wither away by afternoon, and by evening you don't have any existence. In God's eternal plan, you're just a minuscule dot, a minuscule second. But you know what is beautiful about that? God cares about that minuscule dot and that minuscule second. That every day of your life is numbered. He knows exactly the number of days, the minutes, and the hours that you will live. And He has ordained a plan for all those days and numbers. All that we have to do is discover God's plan. And when you discover God's plan, many times we have this question, right? What is God's plan? God's plan is very simple. God's plan is to discover what God has stored for our life days and when He has stored what. So we keep asking this question, saying, God, this year, what have you stored for me? This day, what have you stored for me? While this sounds very philosophical, understand that God made everything beautiful in His time, but with a purpose. He did not create anything without purpose. So every minute of our life is also purposeful from God's side. And 3:11, He has made everything beautiful in its time. And this is something which I really like. He set eternity in the heart, human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Understand? In this tiny minuscule of time that we live, God has placed eternity in our heart, that longing and that revelation that there is something beyond our 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years of lifetime. So this morning, we should have two kinds of praises. One, saying, God, thank you for this amazing, wonderful plan that you have. I might not understand, but teach me to wait. The second kind of prayer would be, Lord, many times I wanted things to happen by my time, but thank you very much for holding it off. Only when you experience what God has held off in your life, you would have tasted a little bit of God's eternity. Because then when you look back and you say, right, oh, if this happened 2 or 3 years earlier, right, I would have made a great loss. Or if this had happened a little earlier than I expected, I don't know what would have happened. And thank God, not only for things that He has fulfilled in our lives, the better thanks is to stand up and say, thank you, God, for withholding so many things in my life. That way, you're also acknowledging God's purposes. So this morning, let's surprise God and say, thank you for not allowing things in my life. Many times our testimonies are, God help me with this, God help me with that. But I think 1 or 2 weeks ago, somebody got up and said, this did not happen in my life and I'm thankful for God. So that is understanding God's purposes. So I encourage all of you, stand up as a family, as a couple, as children, and say, God, thank you for things that you have withheld in my life because the times are in your control and you have put eternity in my heart with a purpose.